Good morning, church. It's good to be with you this morning. You learn a lot by looking at kids. The kids were coming out and putting their money in the bucket up here, and one little girl came up. She had her money in her hand, and she dropped it in, and you could see on her face, she said, well, that was fun. And she looked in the bucket, she says, now I'll take my money back. So, and I think some of us are kind of still there. Well, yeah, we want to be generous with the Lord, but hey, I needed that, you know. It is good to be with you. Wonderful to be in the bright sunshine and to enjoy the bright light of your fellowship. You make Nikki and I feel so welcomed and so warm here, and we appreciate every opportunity that we have to be with you. October 27th, 2004. You may not know the significance of that date, but it is a very significant day. It was the day that the 86-year-old curse of the Bambino was finally lifted. Now, if you're a baseball fan, you know all about that, but if you're not a baseball fan, you may be going, what? Did what? So I'll give you a little history. In 1918, the Boston Red Sox won the World Series for the fifth time in, they won it for the fifth time, which was more than any team in that time had ever won the World Series. They were a powerhouse baseball team, feared by all other teams in the league. But then the owner of the Red Sox, Henry Frazee, needed some money. He had a girlfriend who was an actress. She was in a play. The play was about ready to close for lack of funds. He wanted to keep the play going. He needed money, so he sold this man, Babe Ruth, to the New York Yankees for $100,000. And that turned out to be a fateful decision, because with that one decision, the fortunes of those two teams completely reversed. The Yankees, who had been perennial also-rans and had never won a World Series, went on to become one of the most successful baseball teams of all time, and really one of the great sports dynasties of all times. Over the next 85 years, the Yankees won the World Series 26 times. That's almost a third of the time. And after 1918, the Boston Red Sox did not win the World Series at all for the next 85 years. In fact, they only went to the World Series 4 times, and they lost in the 7th game all 4 times. Well, Boston Red Sox fans, after a while, concluded that when Babe Ruth left their team and went to the Yankees, that it somehow put their team under a curse. It sure looked that way. It looked like it didn't matter how good they were, or how many great players they had, or how hard they tried, or how skilled and intelligent and innovative the managers were. They were doomed to failure no matter what. Have you ever felt that your life was under a curse like that? You ever had this feeling that, you know what, it doesn't really matter how good I am. It doesn't matter how educated I am. It doesn't really matter how hard I try. It doesn't really matter how sincere I am. It's just not going to work for me. Things are just not falling my way. I wonder if I am under some kind of curse. Now, you may smile at the thought of the curse of the Bambino, and you may smile a little bit at the idea of, somehow your life being under a curse when things aren't going your way. But I will tell you that you don't have to go very far back. Some of the ones of you who are a little bit older, you just have to go back a couple of generations, maybe just to the time of your grandparents. Those of you who are younger, we're talking probably great-grandparents or great-great-grandparents. But just a couple of generations back, there was a widespread belief in curses that were indeed powerful. If you if you think about it, people just a few generations ago lived lives that were largely controlled and interrupted by powerful forces that were beyond their control. There were all kinds of forces of nature. There were problems in the medical world that medical science had no answer for yet. All sorts of things that could disrupt, derail, and even ruin lives that were totally out of people's controls. And they asked the question, why? Why is all this happening? And then if there was a stretch of time that came along where it just seemed that everything was going wrong all at once, well, you can imagine that they concluded that there must be some power out there that has control over these negative forces in my life, that some power out there that has arranged them all to my detriment. There was a strong belief just a few generations back that there were people out there, call them magicians or call them priests or call them folk medicine practitioners, whatever. There was a belief that there were people out there that had a special channel to those forces out there that controlled the forces and the powers of nature. And they believed that someone could go to one of those special people with special knowledge and special powers and pay them a sum of money, and they would put a curse on one of your enemies. And there were people, again, not too long ago in history, who believed and believed sincerely when bad things happened in their lives, they felt somebody must have put a curse on me. Now maybe you look at that and say, well, how primitive could anyone be? But you know, those beliefs are still with us today. In fact, if what I'm reading is to be believed, belief in paranormal activity like that, belief in voodoo priests and powers, and belief that there are those who can actually access powers beyond us and harm other people as a result, those beliefs are actually on the rise right now. But there was a time, in fact, I would suggest that for most of history, people believe that those sorts of things indeed happen. And that's exactly what's happening in a strange little episode from the book of Numbers that I want to talk about today. There was a time when the Israelites were in the wilderness, and that's the theme of what I've been talking about in my lessons, making it through the wilderness. That's the transition time that God's people go through. There was a time when they were in the wilderness, they were marching across the wilderness to the promised land, and in order to get the promised land, they had to go through another country's territory. That country was called Moab. And the king of Moab was scared to death. He saw this big throng of people coming across the desert. He was getting reports from his reconnaissance people. It says there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of them, and they're heading this way, and our country, Moab, lies between them and where they're going. They're going to lay us waste. King of Moab was terrified, and so what was he going to do? Well, he believed in the ability to use special people to contact the powers up there or out there somewhere to place curses on people. So here's what he did. So Balak, son of Zippor, who was king of Moab at that time, sent messengers to summon Balaam, son of Beor, who was at Pethor near the river in his native land. Balak said, "A people has come out of Egypt. They cover the face of the land and have settled next to me. Now come and put a curse on these people, because they are too powerful for me. Perhaps then I will be able to defeat them and drive them out of the country. For I know that those you bless are blessed, and those you curse are cursed." Now this is serious business. Balaam has a reputation of being a powerful magician who has the ability to say just the right words and to cast just the right spells, to be able to cast curses on people that will actually do real harm to their lives. Balak the king says, "I know that everyone you curse is really cursed, and everyone you bless is really blessed." And so he calls upon Balaam to go and pronounce a curse over these Israelites who are coming toward Moab. And so Balaam takes the money, Says, yes, be glad to help you out. He goes out to pronounce a curse on Israel, but an unexpected thing happens when Balaam begins to pronounce this curse against Israel. Then Balaam uttered this oracle. Balak brought me from Aram, the king of Moab, from the eastern mountains. Come, he said, curse Jacob for me. Come, denounce Israel. How can I curse those whom God has not cursed? How can I denounce those whom the Lord has not denounced? Then he uttered this oracle. Arise, Balak, and listen. Hear me, son of Zippor. God is not a man that he should lie, or a son of man that he should change his mind. Does he speak and then not act? Does he promise and not fulfill? I have received a command to bless. He has blessed, and I cannot change it. And then in the next chapter, Balaam says, may those who bless you, speaking to Israel, may those who bless you be blessed, and those who curse you be cursed. Balaam, who's hired to put a curse on the Israelites, instead winds up blessing them and pronouncing God's blessing upon them. And it drives home an undeniable and foundational biblical truth, and that is, when God speaks a blessing over someone, there is not a curse in this world strong enough to overcome the blessing of Almighty God. Is that good news? There is not a curse in this world strong enough to overcome the blessing of Almighty God. And when God has blessed a people, there is nothing and he makes it very clear. Anyone who wants to agree with that blessing, I'll bless them. Anyone wants to go counter to my blessing and place a curse on my people, that curse is going to bounce off of my people and back on to those who are trying to curse them. Balak didn't know who he was dealing with. Balak thought, well, I'll just place a curse on these people, and bad things will happen to them, and my country will be spared. He didn't realize that he's dealing with some people who are under the blessing of their God. What he didn't understand was that 40 years before, God had come to his people, and he says, I want you to be blessed. In fact, I am going to give you a blessing, and I want your priests to pronounce this blessing over you on a regular basis so that you will always be recipients of my blessings. And he gave that blessing in Numbers chapter 6, starting in verse 24. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face toward you and give you peace. Isn't that a wonderful blessing? It just flows from the lips. I think someone ought to make up a song about that. Well, that's the blessing that God gave to his people to be pronounced over and over and over again. And that blessing is a powerful blessing. And we see it in the book of Numbers. As you read through the book of Numbers, you see all kinds of bad things that happen to the Israelites. I mean, just time and time and time again, they're in the wilderness, and you think that they're going to make it to the promised land, but then there are negative things that happen. In fact, if you read the book of Numbers, you might conclude after a while that the book is misnamed. Instead of the book of Numbers, it should be called a series of unfortunate events. Because there are bad things that happen in the wilderness, and they happen on a regular basis. But as you read through the book of Numbers, you find that in spite of all these negative things that are happening, there is something going on in the life of that community that is more powerful than any of these negative things. And that is that they have been blessed by God, and God comes through for them time and time and time again. And just periodically, when it looks like everything is lost, then God comes through for them. And there's nothing that defeats that blessing. No plans and strategies of any enemies, no fault on the part of any of their leaders, not even their own unfaithfulness from time to time interferes with the reality that they have been blessed by God, and God is faithful to His blessing, and He sees them through. The power of the blessing is real in the book of Numbers, and it can be seen throughout the rest of the Bible storyline. The Old Testament is the story of this blessing from God as it was given first to Abraham, and then the rest of the Old Testament is the story of how that blessing has worked its way through Abraham's descendants and through the nation that rose from him, the nation of Israel, and through all of the ups and downs of the history of the Israelite nation, of how God continually came through with His blessing for His people. And that blessing then carries over into the New Testament, because the promise to Abraham was, Abraham, I will bless all the world through your seed. And the New Testament begins with a particular descendant of Abraham, whose name was Jesus, through whom God has indeed made blessings, His blessing, available to all the peoples of the earth. And we are inheritors of that blessing. Those of us who have named the name of Jesus, who have received His sacrifice for us as the payment for all of our sins before God, those of us who claim the blood of the Lamb as the cleansing for all of our sins before God, we have inherited that blessing. And because we've inherited that blessing from God, we can pronounce blessings on each other, confident that those blessings are backed not by just our words, but by a power that is beyond all power. Confident that as we bless one another, that there is a real force that is being unleashed for the good of those upon whom we are pronouncing that blessing. And that's not a view of blessing that we are very familiar with. It's not a view of blessing that we're very comfortable with. We don't think of blessing that way. Most often we say blessing is just kind of like a throwaway phrase after someone sneezes, God bless you. Or those people with southern roots, there's a use of the blessing in the South that's made clear by comedian Henry Cho. He's one of my favorite comedians. He's a funny guy. He also happens to be a deacon at the Harpeth Hills Church of Christ in Nashville, Tennessee. Funny guy. He makes the observation that in the South, you can say any insulting thing about another person that you want to, and it's okay, as long as you follow it by saying, bless his heart. You can say, that Johnson boy, he's as ugly as sin and as dumb as a box of hammers. Bless his heart. And that just makes it okay. Well, for whatever truth there might be in that, when the Bible talks about the blessing, it's not talking about something that we just say when someone sneezes or some kind of offhanded phrase to take the sting out of an insult. When the Bible talks about us blessing each other, when the Bible talks about us looking at each other, placing a hand on someone and saying, the Lord bless you and keep you, the Lord make His face to shine upon you, the Bible teaches us that real power from the throne of God is released through that act and through those words, because we are God's blessed people, and that is powerful. And so that means that we need to be very intentional about blessing one another, about speaking blessings over one another, especially our children. 20 years ago, John Trent and Gary Smalley wrote a book called The Blessing. If you haven't read that, it's worth picking up. I think it's still available out there on Amazon and other places. It's still worth a read. It's a good read. Trent and Smalley went through the Bible and they looked at the number of instances where the Bible talked about one individual pronouncing a blessing on another individual. Often it was a parent who would pronounce a blessing over a child. And so a lot of the book talks about the importance and the power of parents speaking words of blessing to their children. And they talked about what a difference that makes in the future of a child. Just being blessed by a parent unleashes a positive power in a child's life. And that's important because often there are other messages that are given to children. There are parents who engage in a lot of criticism and fault finding and tearing children down and sending negative messages about them. It's important that we not do that and that we speak words of blessing instead. I think of another comedian that I was listening to recently who said, you know, I hated school. When I was growing up, I just hated school. My teachers told me that I was ugly and that I was stupid and that I was never going to amount to anything. And what's worse, I was homeschooled. Yeah, that's pretty bad, isn't it? You know, there are a lot of adults who never heard the words from their parents. Son, I'm proud of you. Daughter, you have a special future. Do you know how gifted you are by the God who made you? Do you know what you're going to be? Do you know what a change, what an impact you're going to have on your world? There are adults who've never heard those words and who still, at age 30, 40, 50, and even 60, are still trying desperately to receive that kind of blessing in their lives because they never got it from the people who should have given it. Blessings are powerful, and Trent and Smalley, in their book, just outline the elements of the blessing that they find in the Bible. And there are 5 elements they find that are woven through the giving of blessings in the Bible. The first is appropriate physical touch. And that word appropriate is very important in light of the kind of scandals that are going on today. Physical touch is not always appropriate, but a blessing involves appropriate physical touch, laying a hand of reassurance onto the shoulder of another person, just to make that physical connection. That's an important part of the blessing. And then there is spoken words. Not just, well, they know how I feel about them, but actually putting together words and saying positive words to the person that you're blessing. And then those words are used to attach high value to that person. You are valuable. You are priceless. You are special. You are gifted. You are a gift from God on high. And then those words are used to picture a special future. To say, you know, as I look at you, as I see what is developing in your life, here is the future that I see for you. Here's what I see happening as these gifts that God has given you are developed and nurtured. As you receive appropriate discipline and guidance and training, here's what I see developing in your future. And then, finally, those blessings involve an active commitment. The person saying, you know, I'm not just saying words here, but I am committed to help you become what I see you being destined for in your future. Those 5 elements together are powerful. And Trent and Smalley give multiple examples from the Bible of how those 5 elements come together. They talk about how powerful those elements are, particularly when a parent pronounces a blessing on a child. But they're also powerful when we use those elements to bless one another. Which leads me to say that we as a body, as we are going through this transition time in our congregational history, we need to be even more intentional about blessing one another, about speaking words of encouragement to one another. I noticed in the bulletin that there is a there's a group that's wanting to start an encouragement ministry. And that does my heart such good. We are called to be encouragers. And the words of encouragement that we speak are more than just pep talks. They carry with them the power of our God who has first blessed us. I want to encourage those of you who are starting that ministry of encouragement, because we are a community that lives with and lives under the blessing of God, and that blessing is more powerful than any curse of the enemy. We need to commit ourselves to continually speaking that word of blessing to one another. This morning, our shepherds set the example. They called the search team together, and they spoke words of blessing on them. As they finished those words of blessing, then they laid hands on them and said, "We are with you, and you have our blessing, and we are calling God's blessing to be upon you, because we are expecting that God will move through you to do something that none of us could have done on our own." Folks, that's the blessing, and that's powerful. We need to practice that more and more as we seek to encourage and lift up one another. This morning, I want you to be thinking about who is there in my life that I could bless? Who is it in my life that I could speak to, that I could go up to and put a hand on the shoulder or maybe an arm around them and just say, "I want you to know how important you are. And I want to speak a word of blessing from God himself to you. May God bless you richly." You never know what difference it might make. This morning, as we close our thoughts, we're going to sing the last song. And as we do, if there is a need that you would like to bring before this congregation, a need for rededication or renewal, a need for prayers on your behalf, or a need, a decision that you've made to give your life over to the care of Jesus, we invite you to make that known by coming to the front while we stand and sing this song for your encouragement.
God be with you till we meet again. I, his counsels I uphold you, with his sheep securely fold you. God be with you till we meet again. Till we Why don't you be seated for just a moment. Just a quick reminder, as Bob is coming up here, the college group and young professionals are getting together for the first time this evening at Phyllis Tudor's house at 6 p.m. We're so looking forward to kicking off this semester. We encourage you and invite you to please come and be a part of that, 6 p.m., and come hungry. Thank you.
Thank you for those words of wisdom, Mark. We're indeed fortunate to have you here with us. And we encourage you, and may God bless you in your coming week, and your relatives that you'll be spending some time with, may they be all okay. I think a number of you, if not all of you, are aware that Dee House was taken to the hospital yesterday. And let me just late-breaking announcement. She will be discharged this afternoon. I believe some of the prayers of this congregation have been answered. House is in the hospital, but she's now out. Being discharged this afternoon. And most of these others have been mentioned, but not all of them. I'm just going to read this card from George and Ellen Perry. Sue and Wally Hale are sick. Also, Thyra Hager. Bert was just discharged from the hospital last night, or yesterday sometime. But now Thyra is down. So we need to keep her and their family in the prayers. And another mention of the house, and she's better now. Join me in prayer, please. Father God, you are all-knowing and perfect beyond description. You know our secret thoughts. Make us worthy followers. Without your help, we know that we all fall short. Lord, we mentioned some people who are sick and are getting better, but we also think that many people have not been mentioned as being sick. And some people may not know they're going to be sick, the way this flu is going around. So, Lord, you know our needs much better than we do. And we pray that you would be with these people and give them the strength to endure. We all, without exception, humbly ask your guidance in our minister search process. It's hitting a good pace right now, and we pray that you would continue to encourage those people who are involved with it on a almost daily basis, if they're praying daily, which we all need to be doing. Give us the patience and willingness to seek your will in all that we do. Lord God, we make these requests and pray that your will be done. Grant our needs when we fail, even when we fail to know what to pray for. May it always